The National Testing Service, India, is established with the approval of the Ministry of Human Resources and Development, Government of India. The Centre for Testing and Evaluation, under the Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, is carrying out the scheme of the National Testing Service, which has been created with the huge responsibility of evolving consensus on the mechanism for testing and evaluation so that a common frame of reference can be got for all the subjects of study and for all levels of education. The tabla player has an interest in playing the tabla. He has learned from a teacher and over a period of time acquired a certain amount of ability. But the question is he capable of performing a concert? Which means, is he a proficient tabla player? Proficiency as a concept refers to a skill required to perform a specific job.
NTS is the National Testing Service. It's a scheme of the Government of India under the Ministry of Human Resource Development. This has been created with an objective of developing materials and methodologies for meeting the evaluation requirements of the country. This country has so many universities, and the school education boards. Across the boards and across the universities, there's a lot of variations, and there is no centralized mechanism available in the country to make a comparison across the universities in terms of the infrastructure or in terms of the courses which are being conducted by the universities and the school boards, and also in terms of the individuals who are associated with the education system. As a result, there is a lot of imbalance in the country, and we do not have, as on today, a standard called Indian standard or pan-Indian standard. The reason is we do not have any benchmark or standard which could be called as the Indian standard or Indian benchmark in a particular subject of study. So the Indian government thought it fit to create an organization like this to move in that direction, and that is the reason why the National Testing Service India has taken initiatives to start with language, to work on fixing up of the norms and also the standards and benchmarks in terms of the courses of study, the institutions which are conducting the courses, and also the individuals who are associated with the education system, keeping the language discipline as a starting point. Because language is one which is read by all the students of the country. That is the reason we thought it fit to start with language. So once we are able to fix up the norm of a particular language course which would facilitate, make a comparison across the courses and also make a comparison across the institutions, which would result in maintaining the equality in education.
Proficiency of an individual is the asset, possession, qualities of whatever is required for job performance, and performance is the application or utility of those qualities.
For the common man, tasks of daily life require a certain level of proficiency which can be acquired by practice and repetition. Some tasks demand a certain degree of knowledge to be applied in practice for proficiency in that field. Even an uneducated person may gain proficiency in a particular field through application of knowledge to practice. In the context of education, proficiency is not just about learning textbook information thoroughly. Proficiency goes beyond book or theoretical knowledge to the ability to apply that knowledge in a practical context to perform a given task with a high level of excellence. In a broad sense, however, employers look for certain basic skills such as communication, administration, and the skill to execute a given task with excellence.
See, one of the major objectives of the National Testing Service is to develop materials for the purpose of fulfilling the evaluation requirements of the country. The materials what we mean here is the test materials. In order to understand the whole gamut of the tests, we collected all the tests that are conducted across the globe and made an analysis. The analysis was made with reference to the purpose for the fulfillment of which the tests are conducted. As a result of the analysis, we have come to the conclusion that all the tests could be brought under the three broad categories, like aptitude tests for admission purposes, achievement test for certification purposes, and proficiency test for employment purposes. And here the emphasis will be for the skill, and the skill normally goes with the physical action. Aptitude is a mental process, but when it comes to the question of proficiency, it goes with the performance, which again related to the skill, and the skill is derived from ability. And whatever the course conducted in the classroom or by the universities, they are trying to convert the ability into skill. So that is why when we talk about ability, it goes with the performance. That is what we call it as proficiency. Proficiency normally is a skill which is used for performing a job or given task skillfully by applying the knowledge acquired during the course of studies. So this is what we call it as proficiency, and these tests are conducted normally for the purpose of employment.
The real need for proficiency is seen in the arena of employment. When a candidate steps out into the job market, his or her entire personality is assessed for proficiency to judge how suitable they are for a given job.
Proficiency is a larger concept. It is not a part of the aptitude. The performance is proficiency oriented. So, our basic focus should have been to tap the proficiency in the candidate which match to the job requirement for which he is being hired. When we are selecting for a job, that time we should take into consideration the parameters which is required for the performance of the job, and all our tests should base on which map the proficiency required to perform that particular job. When we go in for checking the proficiency, we see his ability, that is cognitive ability, we see his non-cognitive factor, that is personality, his motivations, his interests, and put all together, then we design a testing program. Giving a simple example, your tests can assure that this person can do a job, but will he do the job? So, it is very necessary that we must know that what is the job role, what is the task, and for which the person is hired. That is the proficiency.
Proficiency in a language is required for proper communication. A person should have the skill to listen, speak, read, write, and use a given language meaningfully for the specific job. The Center for Testing and Evaluation has published books on the tests of language proficiency in 15 major Indian languages.
Requirement here is to find out which job needs the English proficiency or the language proficiency, and which job needs the communication in general.
In general, the major areas where jobs are sought are in the management, clerical and teaching lines, and candidates here are expected to have different types of proficiency for each line to suit the different jobs.
Concept may be general, but job to job the requirement will be different. For example, recruiting the people, probationary officers and the clerk cum cashier and so on for the banks. Their requirement is they should be very quick, at the same time error free. That banking requirement is totally different from the requirement for the teaching job.
A teacher, of course, need not know accounts or administration, but has to be proficient in handling youngsters and helping them learn a subject. What do private organizations look for in candidates who apply to them for employment?
When we go out to recruit for people from those colleges, we first look at their academic background, and the reason for doing that is really for us to get a sense of their willingness to learn, because if they have been consistent in their academic performance, to some extent it is an indication of their desire to learn and them putting the effort to do it. That's why academic and consistent academic performance is one, in some sense, a filter criteria. What we want are people who are learnable, and learnability is the criteria we use, and let me define that a little bit more. Learnability to us is the ability to draw from specific instances some generic conclusions.
If you look into a BPO industry, he should not commit any grammatical mistakes here. He should have a proper flow of communication. The third aspect is pronunciation, and the fourth thing is accent. The way you walk, the way you have your eye contact, the way you smile, the way you sit, the way you shake your hands, all those things matters.
In the private sector, specific jobs ask for specific proofs of proficiency. For example, a person applying for a job as an artist may have to show his or her work according to the stipulation of the company. A large number of candidates look for government employment.
Union Public Service Commission is there, Staff Selection Commission is there, and every state has a State Public Service Commission.
What are the different requirements for proficiency in each avenue?
See, there are general recruitment and specific recruitment. The kind of people required in the administrative service is different from the kind of proficiency required for police service. But at the same time, we have to maintain a kind of standard for the whole country. When hundreds of people or thousands of people are available, we also have an option to identify the best performance.
For Union Public Service Commission, raw hand is recruited as IAS, IPS and Indian Foreign Service officers. Any candidate who is recruited for the specific job, they are supposed to be given foundational training. All those things will shape the candidate to perform better.
Testing for proficiency has today become a need in order to deal with the large number of applicants for a given job. Evaluating the standing of a person in a given branch of knowledge, with or without regard to specific academic learning, is a test of proficiency. Several methods have been evolved to test for proficiency. Test of English as a foreign language. International English Language Testing System.
Testing and evaluation actually stands on measurement. Measurement requires some kind of numerical values, and the numerical values can be obtained on the basis of the quantum of data. The quantum of data and evidences are normally collected through some tools. These tools are called in the education setup as tests. The numerical values will help us quantify the merits and demerits. Once you add the value judgment, it will become the evaluation report. We need to fix up a scale, then only we can get the numerical value. The scale can be obtained only by identifying certain measurable units. These units are possible only when you identify the dimensions associated with the object that you are attempting to measure. Here, proficiency is the object. Proficiency is an abstract object. We need to build up a scale. That scale requires the dimension. The dimensions are the associated qualities. Weight is a dimension. For measuring the weight, an unknown part of the dimension is declared as a fundamental unit. The multiples of that unit becomes the measure of the weight. Then from the dimensions, we will have to build up the unit. That unit will help us to measure the proficiency. So this is how technically and also that scientifically we have to approach.
Proficiency of an individual will be the three qualities of head, heart and hand. Certain jobs require a particular quality of grey matter, quality of application of mind, thinking, perception, decision making, problem solving. These qualities are qualities of head. These are to be supported with emotional qualities, handling one's own emotions, handling the emotions of others with whom he is working, or motivating others to extract the best in them to make them perform in a better way. So, these are some of the qualities which are required for successful job performance. Leadership, team building are another qualities of that center.
With such varied requirements for proficiency for the sake of employment, and with so many candidates who wish to apply for jobs, there is a need to understand what the components of proficiency are. Proficiency reflects not how much the student knows, but whether he or she has mastered specific skills and content deemed prerequisite for a particular job or course of study. Proficiency is also defined as the accomplishment or expertise in a subject or a body of skills.
An in-depth analysis has resulted in the identification of major and minor components of proficiency.
Proficiency involves performance, which is perceived in terms of imitation, manipulation, precision, articulation, and naturalization. This could be seen as reflected under the psychomotor domain of the taxonomy of educational objectives. Imitation is the skill of observing different phenomena, actions, etc., and replicating these. Manipulation is the skill of performing certain actions in a constructive, exploratory, and exploitative way by following instructions. Precision is the skill of performing the task appropriately with the required degree of accuracy. Articulation is the skill of coordinating a series of different actions with consistency and precision to solve problems. Naturalization is the skill that enables to give or provide instant responses. The minor components of imitation are sequencing, putting things or actions in order, experimenting, selecting appropriate presentation techniques or tryouts, demonstrating, presenting activities or products, and repeating, redoing the activity or process for reinforcement. The minor components of manipulation are designing, developing a concept or a structure, shaping, determining and giving a shape to the design, executing, putting together ideas and objects to formulate new ones, fabricating, manufacturing a product involving various processes. The minor components of precision are measuring, to calibrate, calculate, and compute values with accuracy, operating, to work with the constituent components in a proper way, handling, to deal with a given situation, presenting, to give the product in a desirable form. The minor components of articulation are planning, forming concepts or creating and maintaining a course of action to meet the objectives or requirements of an endeavor, preparing, constructing, making or developing things necessary for production, coordinating, sequencing ideas or components to make them work effectively as a whole, producing, creating, assembling, manufacturing and presenting goods or artifacts. The minor components of naturalization are acquaintance, getting familiar with the new aspects or dimensions, convincing, adopting skillful ways to make new aspects acceptable, internalization, acceptance of attitudes, principles, etc. by the individual, managing, regulating the ideas of various constituent components to work effectively.
Performance involves 5 components. For each one you will have certain values. Added up together will give you some number. That number is called index.
The performance index for a given activity represents the average performance of the user in that activity and is usually measured on a scale of 0 to 100. A student or teacher can use the proficiency index as a guideline to decide the next step in the learning process.
Generally acceptable fact that the kind of certificates people are giving are not acceptable to the employment agencies because people are coming with so much of marks and they are not able to do even minimum. Something wrong with the person, or something wrong with the recruiting agency, or something wrong with the tool which is used for identifying him as a perfect person or suitable person.
When we design tests, we have to consider the requirement of the job, and addressing to the requirement, we design the tools. Now, once a tool is designed, that tool can be used for same kind of job functions. Whenever there is a functional change, that functional change has to be taken into account while designing another test, and therefore, we have to address to those specific requirements. But practically, it will be difficult to collate and integrate these qualities, general qualities of the individual, general competence of the individual with the specific requirement.
Now, we are trying to find out the reasons scientifically, and also we are trying to come out with some kind of solution along with the alternatives. Once we fix up a norm which is applicable for the whole country, then any institution can compare whether they are on par with the norm or above or below. Then any individual in the country, irrespective of the subject of study, can compare himself or herself with the national norm and decide whether he or she is above or below or on par with.
Well, National Testing Service is a dream come true for this country. In this country, we have a phenomena what I call it as a discrepant achievement. Discrepant achievement is that there is a gap, there is a education available, but when we come to the employment, the people are not employable. That means there is a gap. Now, the National Testing Service role becomes very critical in this country. In terms, conduct nationwide survey wherein work out the benchmarks. What are the benchmarks for say proficiency in English? What is the benchmark say proficiency in Tamil? Benchmark for proficiency in Bangla, benchmarks in Punjabi, in Dogri, in Hindi, whatever. Work out the national benchmarks for each type of proficiency required for the employment.
When the UPSC recruits the people, your Kannada MA and Kashmiri MA and Tamil MA are treated as equal because they are masters of arts. The contents are different. As a system, every language will have some certain common things. So those common things can be identified, listed out, and whether all these things are achieved by all these language learners. If we make that kind of arrangement, probably it would be easy for identifying across the languages whether they have reached the same proficiency. That kind of proficiency is available, then they will become fit to work in anywhere in the country under central government, because central government needs the people who have comparable proficiency across the languages.
These benchmarks will put all the education boards and all the curriculum designer and policy makers on alert that the National Testing Service will require this much level of proficiency, which will be the requirement of this nation. In order to match that, I have to start my testing process right when the student is in the classroom. I must meet that standard. That will encourage national competition with a level playing field. That will be a level playing field between the rural area, between the urban area, between the metros, between tier 2, tier 3 city. You see the scenario in this nation. The rural population, despite the fact that they are good in quantitative ability, in reasoning ability, are underrated at many times because of the knowledge of English. Because quantitative questions are asked in English, you ask in that language. Now, if you load that person with the other language, it becomes a very difficult for him. Secondly, these benchmarks differ from industry to industry, place to place, and the candidate does not know to what level he should compete, what should be my percentile. But this benchmarking has to be done at national level, so that we see where our benchmarking stand vis-a-vis international standards. what type of education and quality needs to be improved. And this is the greatest role which no agency in this nation has performed, and NTS, if it takes up, it should take up fast, and in my view it is a dream come true.
The ultimate truth of proficiency, however, is that it is content free and context free.
In any context, he should be in a position to perform a particular job which actually needs the application of what he has already learned.
In the larger scenario, the proficiency of individuals is instinctively apparent to an observer, and their ability to perform with presence of mind in an ad hoc situation will be judged subconsciously by the observer.
When we are in one country, then we should need comparable proficiency as far as language is concerned. And that is what we are calling it as concept-based continuum of graded syllabi. Ultimately, what you want to teach in language. Those things are identified and classified, which we are classifying up to 7 levels. All are common to all the languages, not only Indian languages, the whole world.
In the final analysis, it would be mainly the motivation and practice of the individual, driven by a certain aptitude to reach a level of achievement which dictates his or her proficiency in a given field of specialization, which in turn is the determining factor for a career choice in life.